Hello and welcome. I'm Eleanor Hill, and thank you for joining us here today for Treasury First with Nomentia. Treasury has always carried a slightly hidden responsibility within organizations. When everything's working as it should, all is calm, cash is visible, forecasts are holding, payments are moving without friction, it tends to go largely unnoticed. But the moment that something shifts, this is where the pressure lands on Treasury. And I think it's fair to say that there's been a lot of pressure building at the moment within Treasury departments. Markets are much more unpredictable, liquidity is under a lot of greater scrutiny, expectations from leadership are intensifying, yet many Treasury teams are still working with the processes, the systems that they've had for years, and they were never, ever designed for the level of complexity that they're now expected to manage. So today is really about confronting that gap and being honest about what Treasury needs next. And we have a fabulous panel lined up to do all of that. But before we get to that, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Alexander von Schirmeister, who is CEO of Nomentia, and he is going to give us a very lively keynote all about Treasury technology and everything that's happening at the moment. So Alexander, please do come and join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Let me start by talking to you about Excel. I was with a friend the other week, and we booked our vacations together. We have been for many, many years. And he commented on the fact that the cost of the transportation from the airport to the hotel had been increasing consistently over the last 15 years. Okay, yes, I know, but how do you know? He's like, I've been tracking it on Excel. And he showed me his Excel spreadsheets, hundreds of tabs, where he tracks taxi costs, the cost of a pound of meat, toilet paper, for all of his expenses. Now that's a fascinating use of Excel in a personal circumstance. But the same week, I was sitting next to a treasury manager I know, and I was watching over her shoulder as she was working her Excel magic. I confess, I'm a bit jealous of that. When I learned how to use Lotus 1, 2, 3 in Excel many, many, many years ago, I only ever became an average user of Excel. Simple pivot tables is maybe as far as I got. And so I'm always fascinated when I see Excel whiz kits just changing tabs and putting in formulas and being able to kind of manipulate complex amounts of data. And in Treasury, it's really fascinating. I was just completely fascinated by how this treasurer was managing an incredibly complex operation on hundreds of tabs in an Excel spreadsheet. And as we were chatting, she said to me, look, Alex, I will never let go of Excel. And I asked her why. And I asked myself, why is that? Why was she so attached to Excel? And I realized it wasn't necessarily resistance to change, but it was because she had mastered the tool. Excel had become the product of her ingenuity, the product of her mastery, and it was the place where she knew exactly what to do and where to go. And I respect that, and I don't think Excel will ever disappear. But the question is, why do we think Excel will persist? Because it does hide a very important structural risk. I heard of a company the other day that manages their entire cash flow forecasting on Excel. It takes them half an hour for the file to actually boot up. Now, you can imagine the structural risk in that. And the reality is we are living in a world where volatility is the new baseline. You can think of individual events like the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009, COVID, Brexit, the geopolitical situation we are in right now. Those are the new norm. Volatility is the new baseline. And the first place that shows up is in your cash positions. liquidity pressure shows up in Treasury first. Cash never lies. And when those weaknesses appear first in those cash positions, you better know what you're doing. And you want to make sure that you have full mastery and full control over your processes, your data, your tools, and your information. Now, let's put some numbers to this. We conducted a recent Treasury Trends Insight report, and 56% of Treasury teams told us that they're satisfied with automation. That's great. It's a good start. I'm worried about the other 44%. We also heard that a third of treasurers are uncomfortable with their controls and tell us that their controls are inconsistent. Almost 2/3 told us that their data is in separate data silos and they have an incredible fragmentation of that data and hence have a lot of manual processes to import and export data from one place to another to be able to see what's going on. And almost 40% of Treasury teams told us that resilience was a rising priority, especially in the face of economic uncertainty. Now, I listen to that and I look at the report, and it reminds me of my favorite quote. What are the 7 most expensive words in business? The 7 most expensive words in business are, we have always done it this way. We have always done it this way. And the reality is, problems and challenges very rarely explode and happen overnight. It's like the boiling frog problem. They accumulate. Small problem here, you fix it. You write a new Excel macro. Another little challenge here, that's okay, you create a new Excel tab to manage that. Workarounds become normal, and workarounds accumulate. Smart people know how to compensate for weak systems. Smart people have the ingenuity to find solutions. But eventually, there's no room to maneuver. I had a former CEO many years ago that told me, you know, Alex, sometimes, even though you see a problem is coming, you just have to hit the wall. It's only hitting the wall that will wake you up to the reality that you need to change. Well, in Treasury, you cannot afford to hit the wall. There is no room to maneuver. And taking those risks seriously is critical. Now, I will be the first to tell you that technology alone is not the answer. You can buy new tools and new technology and design new processes, and you probably have to, but judgment still matters in Treasury. People still matter in Treasury. And it's a combination of that judgment and those people with the tools and technology that will give you the tools you need. Now, doing nothing is also a decision. You can keep Excel and only Excel, but you need to recognize the fragility of relying on a single tool in the world of volatility that we are living in. And you know as well as I do that successful organizations act way before the waves rise. And I think that is a conversation worth having. Thank you very much. Eleanor.
Thank you so much for that fantastic keynote. Lots to dive into there. And one of the things that I would love to come back to is the fact that doing nothing is a decision. Takes me back to my French philosophy at university. Did a lot of existentialism and discussions around that. But if you've got a CFO who's looking at your systems, things are working as they are, how do you have a conversation with them around changing something, getting measurable ROI, investing in transformation when things are actually working as they are?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and luckily one I have a good answer for. There's 2 sides to the ROI. The first one is just a pure tangible efficiency ROI. You're likely spending a lot of hours and time in manual processes that you could significantly shorten. And now, whether that becomes a headcount saving or time saving or an opportunity cost saving, obviously up to the CFO to decide. But there's a very significant efficiency ROI there. Now, the more important ROI is probably the risk avoidance ROI. I think any CFO will understand the notion of paying for insurance for a future that you don't want to happen. There is a operational risk avoidance. What happens if your treasury person that does everything on Excel is sick at the end of the month and you miss a pay cut or you missed a update on FX rates? There's operational risk. There's obviously a risk and compliance risk that is becoming increasingly important. And ultimately, the opportunity cost risk of if you don't have good visibility on your liquidity or on your cash positions, are you able to make the best resource allocation decisions that you should be making? So I think any good CFO or treasury head will understand all of those components as part of the ROI conversation they need to have.
But if our treasurers are out there today thinking, okay, it's a really good strategic decision for me right now, actually, to do nothing, are they kidding themselves a little bit? Are they just kicking the can down the road?
I think the reality is, in finance, we are wired, right? Our DNA is wired to be conservative and to be cautious and to be careful. So you have to go into it with the assumption that you probably have a bias towards inaction and a bias towards letting things stand as they are. But I'll go back to the quote I used earlier around the most expensive words in business. We have always done it this way. And I would point to two risks in that. First of all, there's probably a competitor out there that is doing it a new way. And do you want to be caught asleep at the wheel? Do you want a small, nimble company to just pass right past you because they were more aggressive in adopting new technology and new processes? And then the second aspect is simply, are you getting too comfortable? Are you that frog in the boiling water that isn't realizing the fact that the temperature is rising and rising and rising until it is too late? And so I do think everyone, and this goes for every function, whether you're a head of HR or a head of finance or a head of operations, everyone should continuously look at their existing and current setup and challenge, is there a different way of doing this? Is there a better way of doing this? And almost do an audit of the processes and the tools and the technology on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, thank you so much for that and for setting us up for our panel discussion, which will come. And in the meantime, Alex said, don't get too comfortable with things that you're doing, but we do want you to just settle in for a moment because we're going to show you a very short video while we get ready for our panel discussion, and we will be back with you very shortly. Welcome back. It's now time for our panel discussion where we will look at some of the truths about Treasury technology. So we've got some provocative statements that we're going to be discussing with our wonderful panelists, and I will now ask them to briefly introduce themselves. So over to you, Harry.
Yeah, Harry Rantanen is my name. I work as a business developer at SEB and around the transaction services with large corporate and financial institutional customers.
Brilliant stuff. Pekka.
Happy to be here.
My name is Pekka Ruokaniemi, Head of Treasury at Urban Partners. Delighted to be here today.
Thank you very much. Alex, we've seen you earlier.
You've heard from me already, yes. The CEO of Nomentia. It's great to be here.
great to have you here. Thank you so much, guys. So, as I explained, we're going to have some fairly provocative statements, hopefully a bit of good dialogue. I will give you a statement. I would love you to do a quick show of hands as to who agrees with the statement, and then we will dive into them a little bit deeper and see how we get on. So, let's have a look at our first statement. It's one that tickles me because I write this so many times in all of the articles that I do about Treasury, is every vendor says that they are a strategic partner, and ultimately it's now just become the license fee. So who agrees with this statement? Show of hands quickly.
Partly.
Oh, Alex doesn't. Okay, let's go down the line. Tell me a little bit more, go deeper into your views. Harry?
Yeah, of course. I would say that customer and the vendor relationship should be like a marriage, so that you can anticipate after long life together what is the opinion, what are the expectations on the other side, whether that is spouse or partner. In private life, you should follow a similar type of line. So you should be there on the customer decision making before the actual decision is made. So you are able to provide market intel, information, support from the beginning, and not only just saying that, okay, now comes RFP, request for proposal, and then we deliver our answer and hope the best. That's not the way of working. I would say that you should be there hand in hand with the customer and help out when the help is needed.
Yeah, that's definitely the ideal, but I do still speak to treasurers who say they go through all of the process and then it all tails off and they're left to their own devices. So Pekka, your thoughts on that? Is it just a marketing phrase that gets thrown around?
Yeah, I do agree with Harry. So I think it's when you go to a vendor pitch, so if they straight away tell you that it's going to be strategic partnership, something is alarming here. So I don't fully buy it.
Yeah.
I do agree that it's kind of the long-term collaboration that you're building up. So it's built on a trust and kind of a mutual value creation rather than transaction-based pricing and deliverables. So I think it should be not considered to be done on the day one, but it's kind of a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
And both parties understand that this is business anyway.
Exactly.
And when you create value for both sides, then it's going fluently without any disputes on pricing and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Because you are both creating the value.
Yes.
For me, it's the value creation for the company. For the vendor, it's the value creation for the vendor itself. But you have mutual targets which you're aiming to, and try to create mutual value there.
Yeah, it's a two-way relationship,
Absolutely.
not just one way. But I know what you mean about the phrase strategic partnership kind of gets your hackles up a little bit. Alex, what would you say? You said you didn't really agree with the statement.
Well, I think you're right. Strategic partner may be a bit of motherhood and apple pie. and so it might be a bit exaggerated. But the reality is, a vendor that does this well spends a considerable amount of time getting to know the customer that they're selling to, spends a considerable amount of time as part of the RFP and the sales process, but then as part of the implementation process to get deep in the weeds of where the customer needs are and how they can help solve them. They build a relationship with that customer that should hopefully extend way beyond and past the signature of a contract. Treasury and payments and liquidity software is complex software. So you don't just serve yourself off a website. We have implementation teams that spend considerable amount of time with our customers to make sure that the systems are properly set up and tested and work well. And then afterwards, there's an account management relationship that stays in place to make sure that the relationship, not only blossoms at the moment of the sale and implementation, but also in the future. And so, call that a strategic partnership or call it something else. It definitely isn't just a license fee. And if you have a vendor that walks away the moment the contract is signed and sees a license fee, then that wasn't the right vendor.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, as Harry said, it's very much like a marriage, and you have to put in that work on an ongoing basis and still have those dates and everything just to keep things moving. But if in one sentence, if I ask you to sum up what makes a strategic partnership versus just a vendor transactional partnership, Alex, what would you say?
Well, I think knowing the business of your customer as well as the customer.
Yeah.
And it's not just I'm selling you software and I'm walking away.
Yeah.
It's I'm trying to understand the solution you need, and then I'm finding the right software for that solution, right? So it's the kind of the intimacy of knowing each other well.
Okay. Good stuff. Alrighty, we've done our first statement. Let's move on to our second. So this is, again, something that comes up in so many conversations I have with corporate treasurers, is that they feel that once they're locked into a platform, they've chosen it, that's it, there's no getting out. It's much more difficult to switch to a different platform, and actually it's just easier and better to stay with that platform long term. So who agrees with that statement?
Yeah, again, partly.
Okay, I'm going to see a pattern here. We'll see how we get along. Harry, kick us off.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. I've been in the business for a long time, and from banking side as well, of course. And bank is a financial services vendor for treasuries, and many times our customers are multi-banking customers. And then thinking about cash management especially, it's really locking in, because it's really hard to switch a main cash management bank easily, because there are so many integrations with the corporate customers in that respect. But the trend is now going further, and there are now technological means of being a little bit more independent. So you could choose cloud-based solution instead of on-prem, and old legacy integration can be with APIs, even though APIs are not always that easy to implement because there are differences. But definitely something that the corporate should think about, and I would say as a guideline that the treasury should know internal organization and corporate operating model. They should define how they work, what is the aim for our work here to serve our internal corporation. And then when the operation model and the understanding what is done is really clearly stated, then you are a little bit more independent from what technology and what software you are using, because then you are in a good position to set the rules and set the criteria how to define the best partners and vendors to come in. And that also gives you some independence to choose the best possible ones. And from banking perspective, I can compare cash management, like I said, a little bit more lock-in, but in trade finance, the corporations are pick and choosing who is giving the best offer for this letter of credit, and then go for that. So it's a little bit depending what we are talking about, but corporate is in the key role to manage that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, like you said, the technology is the cloud, the API, etc. In theory, it's making it easier to switch, but I still meet so many people who are having issues with it. So there's a lady, a treasurer I met at a conference 2 years ago now, and she was speaking on one of the panels I was moderating, and she was there specifically because she was going through the middle of a process for looking for a new TMS. She was talking about the RFP or whatever. I met her again last year, and she said to me, "We've abandoned the whole thing, and we're not changing because it was just too much hassle." So, Alex, what would you say to her in that kind of situation?
Again, I think it's not a decision to take lightly. From a technology point of view and from a software vendor point of view, I would say we are innovating continuously. And so one of the challenges that you have when you have a solution is what else is out there, and what new technology and what new innovations are out there, and is your particular vendor keeping up or not? Because at some point, to my point earlier around the 7 most expensive words being we've always done it this way, you may be missing out on significant improvements and efficiencies. But I totally accept the fact that it is a decision that shouldn't be taken lightly, and which is why the implementation of that technology becomes really important. It's not just a vendor selling you the solution, is you need to make sure that the professional service is part of the package in terms of who will spend how much time with you and your teams to walk through the processes of implementation. And is that a credible part of the proposal? You need to be comfortable that that's...
And now suddenly the world is full of new risks like sovereignty, how to rely on different cloud service providers and so on. What are the dependencies?
So much to consider.
And I think it's the offering is broader than previously. So there is AI, APIs, a lot of new vendors coming up, and make it the correct pick. So that's becoming more and more challenging. So the scoping of your need is becoming more important. So complexity. So I think that's holding us back, and many of the treasurers rethink that, okay, we are here now, a little bit stuck. Can we solve this some other way, or do we need to change the TMS, or what are the options? Because the offerings, it's a little bit of jungle at the moment. So.
Yeah, it's a shame because, like you say, there's all these technologies coming. Think, okay, things are going to be easier, but no, we've just got way more choices, and we don't know who to go with now. So it's a good one for the consultants anyway to get onto. But let's move on to our next statement. So this is all about customization, which is something which comes up so much in terms of treasury technology, and a lot of people feel that customization is the only way that they can deal with the complexity that they have within their operations. So they end up spending a fair bit of money talking to their TMS provider, getting things done for them rather than off the shelf. Do you think that's a good approach? Do you agree with that? Quick show of hands. No. Okay, a little bit more skeptical here. Alex, you're going to want to dive in on that one?
It's expensive.
It is expensive.
Customization is expensive. It's expensive to customize. But more importantly, you're hardwiring, you're laying cement, which is very difficult to undo afterwards.
Yeah.
You're hardwiring the highly personalized and curated solution with other solutions in a way that you're backing yourself in a corner. And if one day you do need to sunset a particular technology and move to something else, the cost of doing that becomes prohibitive. So there really is a reason why you should look at who is the best-in-class software that does something I need, and can I buy that and use it in as much as I can the way it's being sold, so that in the future I can also upgrade more quickly, I can change more easily, etc.
And I think it's...
Go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's about configuration and customization. So if configuration can be offered by the vendor, so that the customer can choose which parameters to use, that's much better, because that doesn't build up those debts on technology and personal dependency, and that's really important.
I think quite often we are building complexity over complexity, and not thinking about the scalability. So I think that's kind of what we should be aware of more when creating those customized solutions and on the top of another one. So it's just layers out, and as I said, so the expenses are increasing as well, and the maintenance. So how much time, I mean, everybody's talking about automation. So how much time we want to spend on the customization and then spend money on that. So yeah.
Because only you cannot face the actual problem in the process.
Exactly.
Then you just solve it by doing a customization.
Absolutely.
Then it will be inherited for many, many years ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a rolling effect, isn't it? And it all adds up, and then it just becomes a house of cards, which at some point is going to come down. But Becca, you mentioned automation there, and that brings us on nicely to our next statement. So automation is absolutely the order of the day, it seems, but obviously it reduces headcount. Do you think that's the ultimate agenda? Let's just have a quick show of hands, and then Pekka, you can give us your thoughts. Do you think automation is all about reducing headcount? Anyone agree? No. Okay, go on.
No. Yeah, from Treasury perspective, so hearing the news stating that AI is taking over the jobs, and of course that is a concern for many of the employees. But from Treasury perspective, so if you think Treasury, it's usually quite light staffed. Of course, there are big treasuries as well, where there is a little bit of tasks that automation could take over. But from my perspective, I mean, thinking about the light staff treasury, so instead of looking at short term, which is kind of a cost cuts and then making a little bit savings, so that shouldn't be the case. It's more about the long-term productivity, how much we can increase the productivity by automating things rather than looking at only the short term. So the management is looking like, okay, let's take a couple of headcounts off because we can automate this. But the other side of the coin is the expense of the automation. So is it really the short-term cost saving rather than kind of a long-term productivity and being more efficient? So you need to think about kind of the whole cost aspect of that. And from my perspective, it's not about losing job in treasury. It's rather being more efficient. So where is the value creation? What more can you create? So improving your forecasting capabilities or creating more value for the company through creating additional income through other places rather than using a lot of time for the manual things, which could be automated. So
it is interesting. It's definitely changing the way people are looking at jobs, though, I think. And I've seen a few redundancies lately in the Treasury manager layer. I don't know if it's related to that, but I have interestingly seen a couple of companies advertising for Treasury AI specialists. So these are the big treasuries that have 30, 40 people, and they're specifically looking for someone whose sole job will be AI and automation within Treasury, looking at every aspect to redo things. So there's some good opportunities coming as well, but a lot of upskilling needed. But guys, do you think that we will have no one left in Treasury? How's it going to be at the end of the day?
I would say that many of the AI automation projects are failing because people are not involved in a good way.
Yeah.
So you do not take care of the other part of the equilibrium, which is people. So that you can do, like you said, Pekka, that there are trivial tasks that definitely should not be done by humans. And you have rule-based automation for that. And then the second level is the exception supervision, so that there is people looking at some more complex processes so that it's automated, but then there might be some hiccups and then people are solving that. And the highest level is that where you actually need a high-level decision making, and there we are augmented by the AI and automation so that we can be helped out, but finally the human being is doing the decisions. And I'm still referring back to that operating model, because that gives quite easily some answers for these layers, that where should we automate and where not. And then skilling the people, reskilling the people to manage that change, because most probably the people at Treasury will be much better equipped when they know what to do, and then they can focus on the things that are more relevant for the organization, both the Treasury organization and internally the whole corporation.
Alex, do you agree?
I think they've said it very well. And again, I said earlier, there's a significant importance of human judgment in Treasury that is still required. I also think a lot of automation is very good for individual tasks, but oftentimes Treasury isn't just an individual task. It's a workflow of various tasks that need to come together, and you will still need the human glue to have that human judgment to supervise.
And I think you always, you always need a human touch there. So you cannot go to your CFO then say that AI said so. No, you cannot do that because you need to make the final judgment.
You can test it.
You can test it, of course, but I mean, the outcome is going to be questionable.
And someone's got to be responsible at the end of the day, and that's one of the things with AI
and
as
who's
well.
answering the follow-up questions?
Exactly.
So it's going to be AI again and so forth. So you always need a human touch there.
Yeah. Fingers crossed anyway. That's what we're hoping for. Guys, on that note, I wanted to move on to one of the barriers to automation and using AI that comes up quite a lot in discussions. And I speak to a number of treasurers who say our data is just too much of a mess to even begin thinking about proper automation using AI. Do you agree that data is a huge barrier and that they shouldn't be looking at automation and AI? They can't get to perfect automation if they don't have perfect data?
70% true, 75% true.
Go on, tell us a bit more.
Yeah, that's really close to my heart. I've been in the ISO 20022 standardization work from the practically inception of that standard, and I really love semantic models where you can actually define what means payment date, what is booking date, and so on. So that's definitely important to solve. And then, of course, even going further, so not only data information, but also knowledge. We are now in the brink of that kind of ontologies as well, how do you relate that information? Because that gives also AI better opportunity to help out in a true way and truthful way instead of having hallucinations. But still saying that you shouldn't go into perfection there, because if you wait to get all the data harmonized and really well cleansed up, then you miss the opportunity to make automation happen. So that's better to start the work, even you know that, okay, I'm 75% ready with the cleanse up, and then I do my semantic model there in a good way, but now I have to start. I have to do the work and see what is the next step needed in the data governance journey. But that's good also to have a partnership with your vendor so that they can tell you that what is the right way to go. And not only one vendor, because usually treasuries are using multitude of systems, and hearing them and also advising them where to go. Because again, operational model is the key. Where you want to go, what is your aspiration? And that's then guiding also the data journey.
perfection is the enemy of progress. That's the
Yes.
thing to remember. Always have to remind myself, so I'm a terrible perfectionist. But Pekka, what would you say?
I don't think data is going to be ever 100% correct.
No,
So,
no.
so that's never going to happen. The key is to have the data governance. So that's
Yes.
one thing. And then the data ownership. So if nobody owns the data, who's going to fix it? So the governance, ownership. So it's all about that. And you should start from the easy picks. So you shouldn't look at, okay, I need 100% or nothing. So that's not the case. So easy picks, high volumes. So that's where you should start.
Yeah.
And then you have the middle ground where you have the data roundabout correct, but not 100% correct. So what to do that? So who's the ownership? Who's going to fix it? Who's going to follow up? And the last part is going to be the garbage in, garbage out. So it's kind of how we're going to fix that. So at least the 50% should be manageable. And the remaining 50%, that's fixable, but it takes time. It takes a governance. It takes ownership. So I think it's multiple factors affecting on this, but I wouldn't drop the pen because of the data issues. I'd rather think a little bit further how to fix the data than drop the pen here.
Yeah, and like you say, look for those easy picks, the low-hanging fruit, and go from there. Alex, any final words of wisdom on that one?
If we had been sitting here 5 years ago, we would be having a big data conversation. No, I think it was very well said. You need someone in your organization that's responsible for data governance, because data, in whatever condition it is, and it doesn't have to be 100%, but data becomes, if you will, the source and the feeding mechanism for whatever then you put on top. And so having someone in charge of data is critical.
Great stuff. Well, guys, we've covered an awful lot today, so I'm going to ask you to wrap up by finishing a sentence for me. So that sentence is, Treasury technology succeeds when? So I know it's hard to pick one thing, but Harry, what would your number one piece of advice be?
I've been in multitude of implementation projects together with customers, both as a vendor, software vendor, and now as a banking financial services vendor. And I would say that please do not aim only as a success factor for the go live date. Look 18, 24 months ahead according to your aspiration and the operational model, which I've been lagging here many times already, because you should set the goal there. Of course, go live is important. You know, then I'm here, I've done this, but then you will lose a couple of resources and you have to rely on your own ongoing processes and exception management. And that's really key on setting the journey, where we are aiming, and following that.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you.
I would say that the needs are clearly defined, so you know exactly what you're targeting for. You have a clear process, you have the ownership, you have role and responsibilities, and all this is aligned with the business goals as well. So I think that's kind of the key. You have a kind of a good structure that you build the process around.
Excellent advice. Thank you. And Alex?
Very similar. I think it's successful when you don't think of it as technology.
Yeah.
You think of it as, I'm really trying to solve a problem to give you levers for cost control, levers for liquidity management, levers for growth. And the fact that it's a technology that does that, it's almost irrelevant. And that's where the partnership comes in. Right? I'm helping you to become stronger, faster, better.
And it's all about the people along the way as well, I think, which has come out in the discussion, and making sure that you're bringing people on that tech journey, upskilling them, helping through their fears. There's always a lot of cultural change that happens as well. But guys, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel discussion and giving us a very candid view on everything that's happening around Treasury technology.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today, and to our panel for a really insightful discussion. If there's one thing to take away, it's that Treasury sits right at the center of how organizations manage uncertainty. You can't, of course, remove that uncertainty entirely, but you can reduce the number of surprises with a combination of the right systems, people, processes, and judgment. So as you leave today, it's worth asking, what does good enough actually look like in your organization, and where might there still be hidden fragility? Of course, the environment isn't getting any simpler, but the opportunity is there to face this deliberately and to move forward with confidence. Thank you again for joining us today.